But
And Sal, I think that's such a good, I was going to say that's something you can objectively verify as an outsider is someone's website privacy practices. There's a lot you can do in terms of understanding what they're tracking. So there are ways to verify some things without relying on what they say.
yes, so we agree, like one of these tools, we have a post on this, thanks to Sal's suggestions on a tool called Privacy Badger that shows you the trackers that are associated with the website. Is that right, Sal? Am I correct? Yeah. And
Yeah, I mean it's one of several, but there are you know more and more there are. The nice thing is if you know the surveillance technology that I want to see become really good is surveillance for people of the services that they're using, right? So and this goes to, transparency is great, but the proportionality and the balance and the reciprocity of these transactions also need to be there if you really want to do this stuff right. And at open consent, that's a lot of what we're trying to develop. There are tools for people, so that as opposed to tools for companies about people.
right.
And flipping that around, and so maybe surveillance by design is something that we should all be practicing in order to have a better idea about what's going on with our information, and maybe start watching the watchers, so to speak.
Yeah.
Business has to be able to let the employees know, it's just like any other citizen, there has to be transparency there. So
right.
When it comes to businesses, though, who actually owns the responsibility for protecting the data? I believe myself that it's shared. If I'm a vendor and a business uses our service to train their employees, I'm collecting some data, and so I have a responsibility to protect that data. But if the employer requests that data for a report to identify somebody in the organization who didn't do well, where is the responsibility at that point in terms of protecting the data that gets reported back to the employer? So I believe the employer then has a responsibility to protect it themselves.
Do you have any comments on those points, Kat or Abigail, on taking employee data as a vendor, and how should that be handled as a use case?
So everyone should kind of have even a minimal data governance program in place, and understanding the full data lifecycle, as it's called, right? The data you're collecting, data you're retaining, data you're transferring. Certainly you need certain data, and both Sal's talked about this from the commercial perspective and Scott from the employee perspective. What I find often lacking is the retention. So, like if you need, especially highly sensitive data, like if you need a birth certificate or something, I don't know, to verify information, you should be getting rid of that data as soon as humanly possible. So you've done the verification process. Like if you're signing someone up for a bank account, you require a second piece of information as an employee, perhaps, then discard that sensitive information as soon as possible. I always like to use the example of money. If I had $5, I'd probably shove it in my pocket. And if I had 500, I'd probably put it in a wallet. And if I had 500,000, I would stick it in an armored truck and pay someone to move it. The more sensitive the information, the more we have to put up security safeguards around it and be more aware of how we're handling that information. So the less data you have, like Sal had said, the less you're keeping, the easier your job is. We're trying to make your lives easier and worry less about privacy. So anything you don't require, you should not retain, and certainly once you're done with that data, you should retain it. So minimal data when you need it, and then get rid of it when you're done with it.
Which reminds me, there's also an environmental impact to hoarding and holding onto our data for too long. So if you don't care about privacy, but you care about the environment and climate, maybe that should be some motivation to get rid of some excess. But to Kat's point about employees, when you're the vendor, when I advise vendors, I tell them there are a number of ways that they can architect their, particularly software engineers, there are ways you can architect your data flows and ways you can design your product and your service offering to reduce your compliance footprint and reduce your possible liabilities, and push that back onto the client side. And what we're seeing a lot in the PrivTech world, and I'm a huge PrivTech enthusiast, is this push towards the edge and controlling stuff on the edge. So the end user's devices, where most of the fun, exciting stuff happens with the data, On my side, as the vendor, I'm trying not to see it. So a lot of cloud storage businesses, this is what they're focusing on, is the zero knowledge architecture, zero knowledge approach to the way they offer their services. And then they sell that as a selling point, because not just for people who are concerned about privacy, but also any regulated profession like in healthcare, in legal, accounting, etc. They have very, they've got confidentiality obligations as well. So there's a selling point there also. But on the even Kat's example about verifying someone's identity, right now, we don't need each individual small or medium or large size business to gather those documents themselves every time. We have a bunch of online identity verification tools that are turnkey, that are like the same way you wouldn't set up your own payment gateway and maintain the PCI DSS requirements to keep up the security standards. You don't have to have an online identity verification gateway that you build from the ground up and maintain all the time. There are turnkey solutions, like Verify.me's a Made in Canada one is a really good example. But Yoti is another one that's available globally. And then they also offer this service. They offer it, on the consumer side as an offering, but then they also offer it on the business side, and businesses can pay, through different payment models. So it really reduces your risk as well as a business.
I think there'll be more. If there isn't federal legislation, I certainly know that there's a whole lot of state regulation here in the U.S. apart from the important stuff that's going on all over the world. The Brussels Effect is a book that talks about how the EU, while maybe not being a rising economic power, is a rising power from a regulation perspective. So keeping an eye on what's coming out of the European Data Privacy Board and those kinds of places are really good resources for companies if you want to see what best practice is, right? So it's. None of us have to make up what we do to do what we do. We do what people have come to understand as being the right things to do, and those are usually written down somewhere. We don't make it up, and so.